Greetings paddlers, Bill Dawes here from SupBoardGuide.com, and today I'm going to be talking to you about paddleboarding safety equipment. Now, I've been working for many years now as National Safety Officer for New Zealand stand-up paddleboarding, and over this time I've done a huge amount of research into paddleboarding safety equipment, and I have worked with tens of thousands of paddlers on their own interactions with safety equipment. And I have come to realize that there are 4 golden rules that apply to paddleboarding safety equipment. Okay, so this discussion about paddleboarding safety equipment is going to be a bit different to the other stuff you're going to find online. What we're going to do is we're going to look at paddleboarding safety equipment from the perspective of these 4 rules, and it becomes very interesting, and you will realize quite quickly that you're probably breaking one, if not more, of these rules. Indeed, the vast majority of paddlers are actually out there very unprepared. They have safety equipment, but they're not too sure how to use it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and you're going to get a lot of useful information out of this. So what do we mean when we're talking about safety equipment? There's basically 4 items of paddleboarding safety equipment that we all need when we're paddleboarding. We need an appropriate leash for the conditions. We need appropriate flotation or buoyancy, a PFD, whatever you want to call it, for the conditions. We need some ways to communicate. And then last but most certainly not least, what we're wearing. Everything we wear essentially has a safety role, a safety implication. So those are the 4 categories of safety equipment. Funny, for some reason the number 4 keeps coming up in paddleboarding safety. We've got our 4 categories of safety equipment, and what we're going to do now is talk about them through the perspective of the 4 golden rules. The first golden rule of safety equipment is that it's got to be fit for purpose. Now this one might seem obvious, but let's just explore it a little bit, going through our various types of equipment. Your leash, is it fit for purpose? Does it work? Okay, is it frayed, is it falling to pieces, or is it a good, strong, safe leash? Your buoyancy aid. Now, if you've got a permanent flotation life jacket or buoyancy aid, then you can have a look at it and you can see whether it's in good condition. But if you've got a belt pack PFD, does it actually work? How do you know? You can open it up, you can check it, you can inflate it manually, make sure it's not leaking. Because if it's going to leak, it's not fit for purpose. And with both those categories, with your leash and with your buoyancy aid, fit for purpose also means that it is the right tool for the job. There is no one leash that is right for all conditions. So if you're going surfing, paddleboard surfing, you're going to need a different sort of leash than if you're going to paddle down a river. So your equipment's got to be fit for purpose in that sense. Your communications, are they fit for purpose? If you're using your mobile phone as your main communications device, is it charged? Is it working? Is it working in the waterproof bag? Is there signal where you're going? If you've got a VHF or a locator beacon, are they charged? Are they ready to go? And your apparel, your clothing, is that fit for purpose? What does that actually mean? If you're paddling in cold water, is the wetsuit of the right thickness? Or the dry suit, is it in good condition, or has it got a leak? Whatever you wear, make sure it's actually going to do the job properly. So that is the first golden rule of paddleboarding safety equipment. And that's probably the easiest and most obvious one. The second golden rule that applies to any piece of safety equipment, and incidentally these rules, they're kind of rules that I have realized and come up with. So this is my own set of 4 rules. You're not going to find them anywhere else, but actually you can apply them to pretty much any safety equipment, to any sport. They really, really work. The second golden rule of safety equipment is that it's got to be in your hand when you need it. Or not necessarily literally in your hand, but it's got to be there. It's got to be ready to go. So what does that look like for our various items of safety equipment? Now, if you're wearing a leash on your ankle or calf, then fine, that is just going to do its job. You don't need to actually think too much about that. If you're wearing a quick release leash that operates from around your waist, is it actually going to function? Is it going to be there in your hand when you need it? Now you might say, well, yeah, sure it is. It's just going to be right there. But actually what we find in many emergency situations when we debrief them afterwards, people in an emergency discover that the quick release on the leash has got caught underneath their life jacket strap or their clothing, or it's gone pulled around to the side. So it wasn't in their hand when they needed it. And that's pretty serious. Your communications and indeed your buoyancy aid, yes, if you're wearing it, you might say, okay, I've got it, that's good. But what an awful lot of people do with their buoyancy aid is they put it on their board. Now, I mean, that's very nice of you to give your board some flotation, but your board actually floats already, okay? It doesn't need more flotation. You're the person who needs the flotation. And if you get into that emergency situation where you've lost your board and it's floating off downstream with your life jacket on it, that's a fail. You have failed on the golden rule number 2. You need that. You don't want it to be on your board if you've lost your board. Likewise, your communications. An awful lot of people, they put their phone in their dry bag and they put that on their board. Again, worst case scenario, you lose your board, now you've lost your communications as well. Your comms need to be on you, on your body, and likewise, if you're going to take a flotation device, then you need to be wearing it, because anything else is a fail of golden rule number 2. And what you're wearing, okay, that one is not likely to fail rule number 2. So that is rule number 2. Your safety equipment needs to be in your hand when you need it. So now I've got my buoyancy aid on. I can manually inflate it, and it literally only takes 8, 9 puffs. It really isn't a big job to inflate it. And then in this test, I'm going to leave it inflated overnight as well, just to make sure it hasn't got any leaks in, which comes back to rule number 1, is my gear fit for purpose? But by doing this, you get to know your gear. Do this, as I said, a couple of times a season so that you're really familiar with using your belt pack. And then if there is an emergency, you're not going to think twice about it. You just go, hey, yeah, open it up, put it on, inflate it, you're good. Folding these things away, again, super easy. It's not like having to pack a parachute or something like that. Some of my working buoyancy aids I've inflated and deflated 1,000 times. You know, they're absolutely fine with it. But the point is, get to know this equipment and then you'll be so much more comfortable with using it. What you don't want to be is in the situation when you're out there in the ocean, you suddenly realize you need your belt pack and you're not even sure what to do. I regularly in safety courses get people to do this. I get them to bring along their belt pack and I get them to inflate them in the classroom. And what we often find is that because this is the first time they've opened it in 5 or 6 years, they open it and the gas canister is all corroded and salty and would never have worked anyway, or that they've got a big old leak in the bladder and their piece of equipment is completely useless. So it's not fit for purpose. But if you get to know your gear, then it's going to be so much better when the actual emergency happens. The third golden rule of safety equipment is that the first time you use it should not be in the emergency. You need to be familiar with your safety equipment before you use it so that when the emergency happens, you're in your comfort zone and you're not freaking out, trying to work out how to use whatever it is. Now let's just take a few examples here. I have here a belt pack PFD. Okay, now lots of you will have one of these. When did you last try it out? When I'm doing safety courses around the country, the answer usually is never. Because people will say, well, hey, I don't want to inflate it. That uses up the CO2 cylinder and then I need to work out how to repack it, all that sort of stuff. Actually, what you should do, and certainly when you're new to your piece of safety equipment, but generally I'd recommend do this every season, at least a couple of times, is get your buoyancy aid out. Put it on. You can do this at home, comfort of your own home. Manually inflate it. Do you know how many puffs it takes to inflate it? Well, I'll tell you, 6, 7, 8, that's all. Pump it up, then just leave it overnight to see if it stays inflated. That's a real good check you've done right there. You've checked to make sure that your buoyancy aid is fit for purpose. And then pack it away. Easy to do. Get to know your buoyancy aid, because if you're going to rely on this to save your life, and you're out there in the ocean, you've lost your board, you've dislocated your shoulder or whatever, and it's only then that you're trying to figure out how to use your belt pack, That's a fail of rule number 3. Rule number 3, make sure you understand how to use your safety equipment before the emergency, and then it's going to be so much easier to deal with. Get real familiar with your belt pack, okay? And as you can see, the whole point is you don't even need to worry about the auto inflation. If you're comfortable doing this and just putting it on and pumping it up, that's you right there. You'll feel comfortable to use it in any emergency situation, and it saves a lot of problems. Okay? The same applies with our communications. Now, if you've got a mobile phone in your case, you're going to go, hey, well, I know how to use my mobile phone. I use it 100 times a day. But have you actually tried to use it to call the emergency services when it's wet, you've got wet fingers? Does it even work? Are you going to have to take it out of the waterproof case? That could be a fail right there. You then drop it in the water, you've lost it. Likewise with your VHF. I know a lot of people who carry a VHF and they go, hey, I've got good communications, I've got a VHF, I can get the Coast Guard on this straight away. And so I say, right, have you ever tried making a Mayday call? Do you know actually how to do it? And they go, no, I don't, no. That's not cool. That's a fail of rule number 3. Anything you're carrying that you're going to need in an emergency, you need to be comfortable with, you need to be familiar with. And it only takes a few minutes to do this stuff, but it will make all the difference, because I guarantee when you do find yourself in an emergency situation, you're going to be stressed. And that is not the time when you want to be faffing around trying to work out how to use your gear. Damn, it's wet, I can't get it going. You know, that's not cool. The other most important item of our safety equipment in this context, and unfortunately the one that probably nearly everybody fails with rule number 3 on, is your quick release waist belt. Because actually you can't easily practice with that in a genuine emergency. Because if you go and throw yourself out in a 5-knot current and hang your leash up on something to practice with your quick release waist belt, you are putting yourself into grave danger, okay? You do not want to be doing that. So really, that is your one piece of safety equipment that you're probably not going to get to test until you are genuinely in an emergency. But that's still really important information right there. Just know that you can't be 100% confident it's going to work. Something might happen to it. It might end up in an emergency getting twisted round. It might get caught up with other stuff you've got on. Don't rely on it. And that point brings us on to golden rule number 4. The 4th golden rule of paddleboarding safety equipment is that your safety equipment item should not lull you into a false sense of security. Okay? It doesn't make you any more safe owning a piece of safety equipment. A really good analogy for this, you buy a cycle helmet. Yeah, great, you've got a cycle helmet. It does mean that if you fall off your bike, you're not going to get concussed, but you're still going to get, I don't know, broken ribs, fractured collarbone, severe lacerations. You're not any less likely to fall off your bike just because you've got a cycle helmet. And likewise in paddleboarding, just having a quick release leash doesn't mean it's now safe to go in fast flowing water. Fast flowing water is a really dangerous environment. You don't mess with it. Having a quick release leash doesn't mean that now you're going to be safe there. Another one I encounter regularly is people who've got a buoyancy aid and they say, oh, well, I've got my buoyancy aid. That means I'm going to be fine. I'm not going to get any cold water shock issues. If you're worried about cold water shock, wear the right clothing. Don't ask your buoyancy aid to do the heavy lifting and save you from cold water shock. I mean, what's the worst possible outcome from a cold water shock scenario is probably a cardiac issue, cardiac arrest. Now, just having a buoyancy aid isn't going to stop you getting cardiac arrest, isn't going to stop you ending up face down in the water. It will make it easier for them to find your corpse, but really, let's not make the buoyancy aid responsible for saving you from cold water. Your safety equipment should not give you a false sense of security. You are much, much better off not getting into trouble in the first place. So that one applies particularly, as we've said, to quick release leashes. You're not going to get a chance to test your quick release leash in an emergency before you end up in an emergency. So therefore, best just don't get into that emergency in the first place. So that is our 4th golden rule of safety equipment. Don't let it lull you into a false sense of security. So there you have it, the 4 golden rules of safety equipment. Okay? make sure your equipment is fit for purpose. Make sure you can get to it when you need it. Don't wait till the emergency before working out how to use it. And don't let the fact that you own it lull you into a false sense of security, because owning a piece of safety equipment doesn't make you safer per se. Okay. Go away, have a look at your safety equipment and look at it from the perspective of these 4 golden rules. Is it fit for purpose? Can you get your hands on it? Do you know how to use it? And is there any risk that it's making you go to places or environments that actually you really shouldn't be? Okay, well, look, I hope you found this useful. Please do check our other videos on SUP safety, because there's a whole lot to say on this. If you want to know a bunch more, check the links below for to see the books that we have written on this subject. And please subscribe to our channel, like the video, tell your friends about it, let us know your own comments about SUP safety equipment. We'd love to hear from you, and happy and safe paddling.